Awesome. All right, I'm Paige. I'm an alcoholic and grateful to be here with you guys today. And so I know you're all here for the announcements, but just to recap, I'm filling in for Steve. And so rather than continue on in the work that Steve is, we're going to pivot. We're just going to do a themed big book bounce around, which is like a big book study, but with chaos. Uh, and unbridled ADHD is what this will be. And so you should have your books because it is normally a big book study. So if you have your book to hand, amazing. And if you don't worry. I'm gonna read all this stuff. Do you know what I mean? You're not gonna miss anything. But I figured because the holiday that is in the United States right now is American Thanksgiving. And I thought it would be it's a little too on the nose, but I'm gonna do it anyways. Talk about the topic of gratitude. And and I want to share with you a little about my experience with gratitude. See, where I live in the world, we have a lot of what are called three topic discussion meetings. So we don't have many lead share meetings. What we have is very common. You go to a meeting, you read the preamble, you read how it works, you might read the traditions, and then the person who is chairing the meeting says, all right, I need three topics from the floor, and they write it on the board. And then that's what's discussed in the meeting. So that's kind of how the format of a lot of the meetings are in the part of the world that I live. And what that means is that, and I'm sure this is not a unique experience, but what that means is that gratitude gets brought up as a topic all the time. All the time. And I don't know about you, if at least for me, it was easy to sit in the room and be like, oh, gratitude again. And then I also, again, I don't know if this is your experience, but I also had an experience where I was in a tremendous amount of pain in my sobriety. It was shortly after I had developed neurological symptoms that left me in the use of a wheelchair, and I was drowning in pain and suffering and trauma and self-pity. And I had a gentleman that came up to me and he said, but Paige, I feel emotionally handicapped, which is not a good lead into conversation. Actually, he was driving me around, but like not a good way to bring it up. And he says, you have to do a gratitude list. And because I am Captain open-minded and willing, I internally told him internally. I didn't say it out loud, but I internally told him where he could put that suggestion. And then I didn't write a gratitude list for years. That will show him. I was miserable. It was so bad, you guys. I was in so much pain. And so that's kind of, and actually, I had a meeting that I did for a number of years, and we would get a lot of women from this women's treatment center. And also around that time, I was drowning in the pain and the suffering and the self-pity of this physical illness. I mean, my life was living, oh, I might tell that story later. My life, sorry, ADHD. My life was going one direction, and in an instant, it changed. In an instant, my life changed, and I could not do the things I used to do. I could not walk. I could not read. I could not, like, I was very, very sick and very, very unwell, and there was no answer and there was no hope for me in my situation, and I was not okay. And I would go and I would show up to this women's meeting, and we would get a lot of women from this local treatment center, and they would come. And the treatment center, now I want to point out in 12 steps, we got a tradition where we are not affiliated, but these gals would come from their treatment center, and the treatment center had this rule, which is if you said a bad word, a swear word, you would have to say 3 affirmations. And I swore a lot more than I do now. And so they would regularly ask me to do affirmations. And I would do one, I would be like, I'm not in your treatment center. I don't go to the school. I don't know you. I don't go to the school. I just have a lot of feelings. I'm quoting Mean Girls. But I would do these most passive aggressive, just sort of affirmations. And it was just, man, I was drowning in that place of pain, and I couldn't get out of it. And so what I want to talk about, and first I want to talk about this idea of gratitude. because oftentimes people will suggest things like gratitude lists, or ask, come up with things that you're grateful for. And then the response to that is, show me where that's in the big book. That's not in the big book. Now, I don't mean to be pedantic, by which I mean I absolutely do mean to be pedantic, and I will. Page 119. So if you got your book, we're going to bounce around to page 119 real quick. It's not even the first full paragraph, but it's right at the front of the page, right? And page 119. This is me being shenan again. So page 119. So it goes on to say, like, your husband will be the first to say that it was your devotion and care which brought him to the point where he could have had a spiritual experience. Without you, he would have gone to pieces long ago. This is the line. When resentful thoughts come, try to pause and count your blessings. And if you're wondering, that is a gratitude list. A pause and a counting of your blessings is to list the things you have to be grateful for. Rude that they would sneak that in, because I don't want to be doing one of those. You know what I'm saying? Like, gross. And what do I want to point out? What I want to point out is the context of that paragraph. The context of the gratitude list idea comes from the loved ones of the alcoholics, the loved ones of the addicts, the loved ones of those who are suffering, that are feeling this feeling of insecurity, this feeling that, man, and jealousy, why wasn't it my love that was enough to keep them sober? And what do we know? The reason why is because if I have this illness, I am beyond human aid. Human power is not sufficient. But the suggestion is, if I'm coming here and I'm filled with that place of jealousy and insecurity that my love wasn't enough to keep them sober, the suggestion is, pause and count my blessings. Pause and find things that I'm grateful for. And I will tell you, my journey, I don't do affirmations, still aren't my jam. Gratitude lists still isn't something I super regularly do. But I will tell you, something that opened me up to the idea of a gratitude list was the idea of, instead of saying, I'm grateful for, is to instead turn it into a prayer and say, thank you, God, for. Because I promise you, anything good that I have in my life is not me, because I was burning everything to the ground. And you know that expression of having the Midas touch, the Greek metaphor of Midas, this king that everything he touched turned to gold? That was not my experience in untreated alcoholism and addiction, even sober. Everything that I touched turned to not gold. We'll use ash, because I don't want to be impolite, especially if you guys have just had your turkey dinners. So I don't want to upset your tummies. Just thoughtful. But that idea of, like, so instead, when I'm approaching that idea of gratitude, I can approach it through that lens of thank you, God, for. But something that is important for me to understand is that if I am an alcoholic, if I am an addict, if I am a compulsive overeater, if I am a compulsive gambler, if I have an illness that is described in this book, where once I start, I cannot stop. And when I say I do not want to do it again, I have a thought that takes me back again and again and again to that first drink, that first drug, the first codependent, addictive behavior, whatever it is, then I am hopeless. And a gratitude list cannot and will not keep me sober. That is important to understand. It might be useful to sort of lift my spirits. It might be useful to get me a little out of self. But we're going to talk about what gratitude really is and what gratitude really means as we go through this little shenanigans of the big book bounce around. So gratitude is a fine idea for me to list the things that I'm grateful for. A better idea to thank God for the gifts that I have been given. But there's an even better idea through which I can approach this lens of gratitude. So let's open our book, and now we're not going to go too far. So let's go to page 128. And we are gonna pop in bottom paragraph of page 128, the family afterward. Spoilers, we're gonna be in the 128 for a while. You know what I mean? We're gonna be there. Hanging out, having fun, family afterwards, which kind of works because typically most holidays, especially ones like American Thanksgiving, you have to spend time with family. And that can be its own spiritual challenge. I thought if I did a talk on resentments, that might be a little too on the nose. I know gratitude's a little too on the nose, but how to move through our resentments, ooh, that might be a little too direct page. So instead, let's go to page 128, bottom paragraph. It says, he is not so unbalanced as they might think. Many of us have experienced dad's elation. So what we are talking about is the recovered alcoholic, the recovered addict, the recovered whatever brings you to this all-inclusive study. And it says, like a gaunt prospector, belt drawn in over the last ounce of food, our pick-struck goal. And I just want to set the stage because I don't know if, and actually here's what I'm gonna, this is what I did right before the meeting, which I don't know if this was the best use of my time, but this is what I did. So like, what is a gaunt prospector? Like, what does that mean? What is it to be gaunt? What is it to be a prospector? So gaunt is to be emaciated. Gaunt is where, you're just skin and bones. You're starving. And a prospector is somebody who would go out into the world and look for gold or mine for other resources. And so in human history, there's been a number of gold rushes. And I think so basically AI generated a couple images to kind of to throw in the background for this. And so the AI really, really leaned in on the California gold rush, which happened in 1849, which is why the San Francisco 49ers are called the 49ers. And I didn't watch any of the football today. So if they did well or didn't do well or didn't even play, I'm not up to date. So if it's a touchy subject about how the 49ers did, I am sorry. That was inconsiderate of me. So that they heard that there was gold in in California. But there was also a gold rush in the Yukon, which is northern Canada. And that was there was one in 1896 and 1899. And so none of that is particularly interesting. But what I want to talk about is that idea that a prospector, somebody that is out looking for gold, isn't doing it in places where there's cities and communities. They're going out to the remote wilderness. It is like minus 15 degrees Celsius, which is about 5 degrees Fahrenheit here in Canada. And that would be warm for a Yukon winter. So you can imagine the inhospitable wilderness that you would be facing if you were a prospector looking for gold. And I'll, again, just because the visual works so well with the California one, imagine you're out in the California wilderness and you're looking for gold and you're looking for an answer and you're looking for a solution and it's not working. And so what it describes is really a beautiful allegory for my alcoholism, for my drug addiction, or for whatever brings you to this all-inclusive study. And I want you to know what it looks like to start mining for gold. And so I go out to the wilderness and I'm looking for the answer. I'm looking for the solution. And you see what happens is I've got alcoholism. And I start to realize that once I start to drink, I can't control the amount that I take. I take a drink and it sets something off inside of me that tells me I need more. And the more that I drink, the more that I have to drink, and I can't control the amount that I take. But I try to put things between me and that first drink. And that's like me in the riverbed panning for oil. Not oil, gold. You can't pan for oil unless somebody spilt it in the river, and that's a bit of an ecological disaster, so we won't get on that. But I imagine that I'm in this river and I'm scooping up rocks, trying to pan out to see if there is any gold. And that is me trying to put all the things that I can put between me and that physical allergy to try to control the amount once I start to drink, or to control the amount once I start to use. And I'm trying anything and everything that I can think of. I'm changing who I'm drinking with. I'm changing who I'm using with. I'm changing my substances. I'm switching from scotch to brandy. I'm switching from booze to crack. I'll do it like a lady, pinkies up. You know what I'm saying? I'm switching back to booze because crack didn't work. I'm taking pills. I'm trying all these things to control the amount that I take, and it's not working. And I know that I've got to get sober. I know that I've got to stay sober. And it's like I go to the hills and I found no solution, no answer. And I got no food. I'm running out of water. I'm running out of supplies. That gaunt prospector. He's starving. It's like I'm starving and dying in this remote wilderness. And I begin to look and I start, hacking away at some mountains and valleys, and Buddy's got. I don't think that's an effective tool. That's an AI generated tool, but he's got some sort of axe. Imagine a pickaxe, and I'm, trying to hack and cut, and I am trying to, cut through the drudgery of my existence, and it's not working. And I am doing everything that I can. And I want you to know I am trying to put things between me and that first drink, to put between me and that first drug, and they're not working. I'm trying to stay sober. And it is an effort and futility. All of the things that I am trying are failing. And I'll be honest with you, I did not try everything, but my experiences, everything that I tried failed. I start mining, I'm going to get into a relationship. That didn't work. I'm going to get out of that relationship. That didn't work. I'm going to get back in that relationship. That sure as heck didn't work. In, out, in, out, in, out. We can gather I'm codependent. I tried changing locations. I tried going to work. I tried going to school. I tried all these things. And they did not work. They did not work. And I would try seeing doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists. And I didn't do inpatient treatment, but I was hospitalized in a psych ward for a couple months. Nothing was working. And I am starving. I am dying. I am hopeless. The sun is bearing down on me. And we can see with my complexion, I'm not doing great in direct sunlight. This little ginger, ooh, you know what I mean? Because we're doing the California one. So I'm not getting into the frostbite situation. You know what I mean? But my belt is drawn in. It's like your belt has a notch, and we are at the like that last notch. I'm dying, I'm starving. And it says like a gaunt prospector belt drawn in over the last ounce of food, our pick struck gold. Hold on, yeah, I asked AI to generate that. So I got it. This is what I did instead of formal preparation before the meeting. Was it an effective use of my time? Absolutely not. But here we are. Our pick struck gold. And what is the gold that I find in 12 steps? The gold that I find here is not going to meetings. The gold that I find here is the spiritual awakening. So what happens is I'm digging in futility. I never talk about this because it's never relevant. But for a while there, I worked at irrigation. If you don't know what irrigation is, it's basically digging trenches for a living. That's what I was doing. And it is grueling work, especially for somebody of my size, because I had to like hop on the shovel and just tip over. It was not going. But somebody says, Paige, what I need you to do is I need you to pick up that pickaxe. And I need you to pick up that shovel, and I need you to dig in this direction. I need you to direct your energy. I need you to direct your effort into this work, these 12 steps. And I don't know if it's going to work, and I don't think it's going to work. And I think and none of it is actions that I want to do. None of it is actions that I think will help. But I orientate myself in that direction anyway. And I take actions I don't want to take. I do things I don't want to do. I like truly, none of these steps were appealing when I got here, but I do them and my pick strikes gold. and I have a spiritual awakening. I awaken spiritually. And this was everything that I was looking for when I went out into the wilderness that was alcoholism, that was drug addiction. I find that everything that I was looking for in the bottle, I find it in the spiritual awakening. Everything that I was looking for in the crack pipe, I found it in the spiritual awakening. I struck gold. And it says, joy at our release from a lifetime of frustration knew no bounds. There is joy. And you see, we're talking about this topic of gratitude. And in many ways, the topic could also be attributed to things that we hear in meetings that might not be perfectly accurate. And one of the things that I've just been sort of resonating on is that saying of keep the plug in the jug. We might have heard that in meetings. Now, if I have the illness of alcoholism as it is defined in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, it is not possible for me to keep the plug in the jug. That does not work because I have an obsession of the mind that will tell me this time will be different. Nobody will ever know. You just got to get it out of your system. You've been mining in the California wilderness for so long. Just take a drink. You know what I'm saying? But I also like that idea that put the plug in the jug does not work in terms of my spiritual awakening, does not work with my joy, does not work with gratitude. The word Thanksgiving, I did look it up in my 1930s dictionary. So not the holiday, but just the word in my 1930s dictionary, because I'm fun at parties. Steve will be back next week. Don't you worry. But what it talks about is very literally giving thanks, sharing gratitude. And I heard in those meetings, gratitude's an action word. And I'm like, do you just want me to put away the chairs? Like, what are you talking about? And you see what happens if I try to keep the plug in the jug as it pertains to my joy, it is going to wither away and die, just like I was withering away and dying as the gaunt prospector, as the alcoholic or the addict who is trying to do this thing on my own. So it says, joy at a release from a lifetime of frustration knew no bounds. There is just tremendous joy, and that is what is available, by the way, here in the rooms at 12 Step. It is not just don't drink one day at a time. I'm happy to be here, happy to be sober. That's not what's on offer. What is on offer is joy, boundless joy. And if you have not found that boundless joy, I would encourage you to let us help you, because that is what is on offer. This vein of gold that never runs dry. It says, Father feels he has struck something better than gold. Better than gold. I was speaking at a big book study, because I do those, too many, earlier today, and we were joking about how somebody had a lot of money, like a celebrity had a lot of money, and then, ooh, it didn't go well. And I was like, oh, let me try. Ooh, let me try with a lot of money. Let's see how it goes. You know what I mean? But the idea is what we have. The solution we have is better than gold. And that's our experience. What we have here is a solution that is real, that is powerful, we wouldn't even sell it if we could. And it says, for a time, he may try to hug the new treasure to himself. If I just try to hold on to it and think, look at me, look how grateful I am, man, it's going to go nowhere. I was joking about my inverse Midas touch. Everything I touch turns to ash. It blackens and falls apart in my hands. That same gold that is gold in the moment I experience it will turn ashen and fall apart in my hands if I try to hold and hug the treasure to myself. He may not see at once that he's barely scratched a limitless load, that this vein of gold does not run dry. Does not run dry. It will go on forever in perpetuity. It will go on and on. But this is what is asked of me. And it says, limitless load will pay dividends. Y'all know what pays dividends? Like paying dividends? That means when your money's making money. That means when your investment is making money. So it's like, oh, your money's making money. Like that is like, and that's what we're talking about, spiritual dividends. The spirituality begins to grow upon itself. But here's what is asked of me. It says only if he minds it for the rest of his life. Oh man, you mean this thing has got to be a way of life? Annoyingly, yes. This is not a set it and forget it deal. And I cannot hold that gold in my hand and be grateful for it if I do not continue to mind, which is to say, continue to work these 12 steps as a way of life, like my life depends on it, because it does. It will turn to ash and fall apart. So I've got to mind this thing for the rest of my life. That is what is asked of me. And if I do that, the spiritual gold that we find here, it pays dividend. But it also asks that I give away the entire product. I'm just going to do one more screen share, because this is how I use my time ahead. Hold on, screen share. Oh, you know what? No, I was gonna talk about. Oh, when I do the upload, I could get a little fancy and I could put these pictures in. Why am I making my life more difficult for me? I do that all the time. So to keep this gold, I have got to spend my life giving it away. See, I can't keep the plug in the jug with that either. I can't try to hold on to what I have been given. I need to give it away. And when we talk about gratitude, it's wonderful to sit around and count our blessings. It is wonderful to deeper than that, to turn the things that I am grateful for into prayers and to say them, thank you, God, for. But when I really experience true gratitude is when I show up and I give what has been so freely given me to others. And I'll let you know, when I came to the rooms, people would say, you got to give it away to keep it. You know, to keep what you have, you got to give it away. And I will let you know, I was not humble enough to say, I don't know what the heck you mean. In fact, I have no idea what the frick you're talking about. What are you on about there, buddy? Like, what? What? It made absolutely no sense to me. And the reason why I could not understand it is because I did not have the it that they were talking about. You see, there's a lot of things that we talk about that might be paradoxes in the rooms of 12 step, like you got to give it away to keep it. And I don't believe we have as many paradoxes as we think we do. There's often things that are not aligned with the program of action that is outlined in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. But also, there are a lot of things that are, oh man, I'm going to use the word ineffable. Ineffable makes maffable, that are ineffable. What that means is that they need to be experienced to be understood. And for me to keep what I have to give it away. That was something that I needed to experience. Because I mean, you know the expression, you can't have your cake and eat it too? I'm like, yes, but I would like the cake. Why else would I want the cake? I know there are people that do incredible cake decorating, but I'm not really that interested in their cake situation. I will look at it. If I want cake, I want to eat the cake. You know what I'm saying? Like, girl. So why else would I want it? And that metaphor didn't make sense. But what we're talking about is to keep the spiritual awakening, to keep the freedom, the removal of the mental obsession, to keep that pervasive sense of joy and freedom and happiness. What I need to do is help others experience what I have experienced. That is what is being asked of me. So I'll stop the screen share. And that's what I spent my time doing earlier today. And so let's bounce around and let's pop over to page 124. So we're not going too far. Page 124. And as we pop over to 124, we're looking at the first full paragraph that says Henry Ford, and it doesn't really matter who says it. But there's a friend of ours that's been coming to a lot of the big book studies that I do, and he was sharing with me this story, and this story is going to tie into what I'm going to read on page 124. And because it's Thanksgiving, I also told him that I was absolutely going to steal this story. So spoilers. If I steal something, I'll tell you I'll do it, and I'll give you credit for it. So it's our friend George Allen, Texas. He was telling me about how his grandmother was just such like a selfless woman. And she would do Thanksgiving dinner for everyone. And she would always make sure she chose the turkey, the parts of the turkey that nobody else wanted. Like that's what she would do. And doesn't that feel like that's what service is when we first start doing it? You know, like, oh man, I don't want the turkey butt. Don't make me. I don't want to have to sponsor others. They suck. They're the worst. And I'm gonna do it wrong. And then they're gonna judge me. I'm judging them, but I need them to like me. I don't want to do it. Oh, it's gonna be so lame and boring and suck, right? And then what he shared was that a couple of years he had one of the turkey tails, and he was like, that was the best part of the turkey. And that's what I come to find out is the idea when I show up in selfless service. It goes against my natural nature, my natural instincts. But when I do that, I realize it was the best part of the whole deal. So page 124. So once made a wise remark to the effect that experience is the thing of supreme value in life. The thing that carries the most weight, the thing that carries the most value is what is my experience. But I want you to know if the only experience I have is the experience with my illness, I don't got a lot of experience. You know what I'm saying? I got experience with suffering. But that's not enough. And it says that is only true if one is willing to turn the past to good account. So my experience is only of value if I am willing to convert my past and turn it into an asset. It says we grow by our willingness to face and rectify errors and convert them into assets. And to tie it into the gold mining metaphor, I'm that gaunt prospector, and somebody has told me to start digging in the direction of these 12 steps. And how I grow is my willingness to face my errors. How do I face my errors? I begin to face the errors. Like, so the first step is that, girl, I am in the California wilderness. I am in trouble. Like, I'm not doing well, quite sunburnt, not a good situation, right? And all I am doing is I am believing the God that told me that there is a vein of gold that never runs dry. I haven't seen it. I don't know where, I don't even know fully where it is, but I am assured by this person and their experience, and I got nothing left that I can do, and I'm willing to believe their experience. And the third step is simply a decision to begin to mine in that direction. And if I don't pick up my axe and I don't mine in that direction, I will never find that goal. But I pick up that pickaxe and I begin to mine in the direction of these 12 steps. And so when it says we grow by our willingness to face, how do I begin to face my errors? I begin to face them in step 4. When I begin to put down pen to paper my resentments, and I then begin to see where I was wrong, where I was at fault, where I did these exact same things that I'm resentful that they did, where I set the ball in motion and I stepped on their toes, where I see where I was selfish, where I see where I was dishonest, where I was self-seeking, and where I was afraid. I begin to see the errors and the harms that I caused in terms of my romantic and sexual relationship. And the harms that I caused in relationship to a life lived in fear, driven by fear. And I begin to see the truth of who I am. I also begin to face them in the 5th step, when I sit down with God and another human being. And I share with that person the things that I've done. I share with them the depth of my shame, the depth of my suffering. I share with them where I have caused harm in the lives of others. And if I don't see it all, they will begin to shine a light on me and help me to see the truth of who I am. And I then begin to face them again in step 6. After my step 5, I have that quiet hour, I have a review of the actions I've taken. I come to the 6th step where I become willing for these things to go. And then in step 7, when I ask, and they start to get removed. And it says we grow by our willingness not just to face, but to rectify errors. And how do I rectify the errors? I got to see what they are in the step 4 process, see what they are in 5. Be clear on what I'm taking to 6, what I'm asked, and take it humbly to 7. You know what I'm saying? But then in step 8 and step 9, that is where I go to set right these wrongs, to rectify my errors, to make right the harms that I have done in the past. And that process of 4 through 9 is how I grow. And it is also how these things get converted into assets. Into assets. Wouldn't you know that gold that I'm mining was the pain and misery that I was dragging along the whole time? You know, my beggar rocks. I did not think to make an AI generated image of a prospector dragging around rocks. I didn't think of that ahead of time. Just thought of that now because that's how this little brain works. Sporadic is what's happening here. It's like, ooh, idea, and then idea, you know. Sporadic and erratic, actually. So that is what converts them into assets, the process of 4 through 9. And it says the alcoholic's past thus becomes the principal asset. The principal asset, which is the main asset. It's the big kahuna of assets. As I was saying it, I'm like, that's not the best metaphor, but here we are, the main asset of the family. And frequently, it is almost the only one. The things that I bring into the rooms of 12-step, the depth of my shame, the suffering, the things that I have done wrong, if I am willing to let go of my ideas, my need for control, my delusion of control, and I'm willing to mine in a new direction, I'm willing to work these 12 steps as a way of life, like my life depends on it, because it does. The worst things I've ever done get converted into assets. And it says, and it's like not even converted into assets. The main asset, the worst things I've ever done are the most useful things that I have in my life today. And I could not believe that would be true when I first get here. So it says, the painful past may be of infinite value. Infinite value. Oh, that sounds like we got some gold. There's gold in these hills. I did not expect this metaphor would carry so heavily, and I apologize not ahead of time. I apologize as we go, you know. The painful past may be of infinite value to other families still struggling with their problem. My past is of infinite value. And it says, we think each family which has been relieved owes something to those that have not. And so there's a thing that I've found to be true is in the rooms of 12-step, whatever 12-step fellowship you're a part of, I believe that I owe that 12-step fellowship a debt. And it's not a debt that anyone's going to ask me to repay. Like, we don't have 12-step debt collectors. Although when I'm sitting in a room in my wheelchair, like in person in my wheelchair, I'm like, oh, I didn't pay back the debt. Ooh, that's what happened. I'm kidding. That's not what happened. They didn't break my kneecaps. I know. It was like too much, Paige. There was an audible like, ooh. But it is a debt that nobody will ask me to repay. But you'll know when the debt collector is there, because it's not an ogre with a crowbar. What it is a newcomer that says, I'm scared, I need help. It is a meeting that needs somebody to show up and share. Do you know what I mean? It is another alcoholic asking me to be of service. That is when that debt collector comes. And here's my experience. The more that I try to repay that debt, man, the interest payments, they're too much. Because the more I try to repay that debt, the more in debt I get. Because the more that I receive. See, I give away the entire product. And I find that the load that I receive, it's limitless dividends. So I owe something to those who have not recovered. And it says, when the occasion requires, each member of it should be only too willing to bring former mistakes, no matter how grievous, out of their hiding place. And this is what we're talking about when we talk about gratitude. Showing others who suffer how we were given help is the very thing which makes life seem so worthwhile to us now. The very thing that gives me a sense of meaning and purpose in my life is working with others, is taking others through the actions of the 12 steps as outlined in this book. That is what gives my life meaning. It gives my life purpose. And it converts my dark past into the most powerful asset. And I love this. It says, cling to the thought that in God's hands, Sure as heck not my hands, because when my dark past is in my hands, it is, again, I got the reverse Midas touch. It turns to ash in my hand. Or actually, it's me. So it should be, instead of the reverse Midas, it really should be the like dumpster touch. Everything I touch turns to a dumpster. Because we joke about me and dumpsters. You know, the dumpster's on fire. Anything that I touch turns to a flaming dumpster. But cling to the thought that in God's hands, the dark past is the greatest possession you have. The greatest thing I own is the depth of my pain, the depth of my suffering, the things that I went through. And I get to use that to help others. It says, with it, you can avert death and misery for them. And how do I know I'm living in a place of abundance? How do I know I'm living in gratitude? It is not that I'm sitting around simply counting my blessings. It is that I am showing up and trying to give this message to those who want it, to those who need it, for those who are willing to take the actions. That is how I know. See, gratitude is not a thing that I hold on to. It is a thing that I give away. And before I bounce this around again, we'll pop over to page 132. But before we pop over there, you know, some of you guys know I'm a bit of a spiritual seeker. Like I'm a nerd. I'm a spiritual nerdy pants. And just in general, I'm a nerdy pants. These pants, nerdy. You know, I'm a nerd. And so I love seeking from a variety of faith traditions. And in a variety of faith traditions from all over, one of the most sure signs in any tradition, especially those of us in 12 step, the most sure sign of a spiritual awakening is the desire to help somebody else. Which, by the way, does not mean if you're like, oh, I don't want to help people, I haven't had a spiritual experience, I shouldn't help them. No, go help them anyways. Go do that. Go help them. So the most sure sign of a spiritual experience is the desire to go help somebody else. So let's pop over to page 132. And let's talk more about that joy, that gratitude. 132. And we're going to have a look. It's about halfway down the page. It's the first full paragraph. 132. It says, we've been speaking to you of serious, sometimes tragic things. We've been dealing with alcohol in its worst aspect. But we aren't a glum lot. And sometimes we hear that a lot. If newcomers could see no joy or fun in our existence, they wouldn't want it. You see, my responsibility to those that are new, to those that are struggling, to those that are suffering, is to be a demonstration of this power, to be a demonstration of this joy, to be a demonstration of these 12 steps as a way of life. So that light, that joy flows through in such a way that if you are stuck in that darkness, you're stuck in that California wilderness and you don't know that there is a way out, that you can see somebody like me and say, man, she's found that gold. I bet she knows where I can find it too. Do you know what I'm saying? Right? I have a responsibility to those that are new, that are suffering to enjoy life, a responsibility to be happy, joyous, and free, a responsibility. Not just that'd be nice, but a responsibility to them, for them, not about me. So it says, if newcomers could see no joy or fun in our existence, they wouldn't want it. We absolutely insist on enjoying life. It's an insistence. We insist. Do it. Oh, goodness, thank you. That's very kind of you. Like, those are some strong directions. Enjoy life. We try not to indulge in cynicism over the state of the nations, nor do we carry the world's troubles on our shoulder. And that's like if we get too stuck in what's going on in the world, in that place of helplessness. And also, I want to say, if you're somebody that today is struggling with cynicism over the state of the nations, or carrying the world's troubles on your shoulders, what I want you to know is we have a solution. The solution is the 12 steps, and you might be like, girl, no, it ain't. And yes, it is. The things that I am feeling overwhelmed by, I can take through the resentment columns. The things I'm feeling afraid of, I can take through the fear columns. The things that I feel like people are doing wrong, I bring that to the world. The opposite. If I think people are mean and judgmental, I'm throwing that out there, then I go bring love and tolerance into everything I do. And I can take that in as a meditative practice. There's a beautiful meditative practice. It's called Tong Len. And it is where you breathe in the pain and suffering of the world on your in-breath. And on the pause before you breathe out, I always imagine that the God that lives within my heart is transforming it. And as I breathe out, I breathe in that light. And I breathe out that love. And I breathe that to those that need it most. And that is tangible, the stuff that I can do. So if I got the cynicism of the state of the nations, or I got the world's troubles on my shoulders, if I'm Atlas, the Midas and then Atlas, they're both Greek metaphors. So I didn't think I'd be doing that today, but we're metaphors all over the place. Steve will be back next week. And it says, when we see a man that is sinking into the mire that is alcoholism, think of that quicksand, that bitter morass of self-pity, that quicksand that's stretched around us in all directions, the hopelessness of the illness that brings us to this study. That we give him first aid and place what we have at his disposal. What do I have at my disposal? I've experienced strength and hope. I've experienced with the illness that is alcoholism, the illness that is drug addiction, the illness of whatever brings you to this study. I place that. But I also need to have experience with the solution, the spiritual awakening, and experience with these 12 steps, the simple kit of spiritual tools. I don't think were you trying to really figure out where we were at in the page? Because I'm like, I don't think I'm able to count to 16 and do the big book study at the same time. I think I'm good at multitasking, but that has been determined to be a lie, you know what I mean? So I don't think that comment was for me. I think that was to help somebody else. But if it was, I can't do the math right now. I'll do it after. Love you. Alrighty. So, and it says, what do I have? I have that experience with the illness, with the solution, which is the spiritual awakening, and with these 12 steps. And so I've got to continue to inventory myself. I've got to continue. I got to continue to use highlighters. I caught that. Listen, this whole thing, I came here and I'm like, I'm too cool for school. I've never been too cool for nothing. I have not ever been cool in my life. And then I got a real strong opinion on pens and highlighters now. You write enough inventory, let me tell you, I'll tell you about the good pens, Ooh, focus. Alrighty, so for at his sake, we do recount and almost relive the horrors of the past. But those of us who have tried to shoulder the entire burden and trouble of others find we are soon overcome by them. You see, I'm not there to fix, manage, save. I'm there to allow God to change and transform, to restore, to repair, to recover the human being. I'm there to share these 12 steps as a way of life so they can find their own vein of gold. And it says, so we think cheerfulness and laughter make for usefulness. I am not there to fix, manage, save. I am there to be useful, to be helpful. And man, I gotta show up with joy. Because if you've ever been at a meeting where somebody is like, I'm sober and I'm happy to be here. And if you want to be happy like me, you better do those steps. And it's like, no, thank you. No, thank you. I don't want what you have. No, thank you. Like, I gotta be a demonstration of what we have. And it's not put on. It's not fake. I've got to work this thing so that I'm not glum or gloomy. This is how bad my ADHD is. You put anything in the chat and I'll just tie it in. That's not a challenge. I've got to wrap up soon. But that idea that I got to be a demonstration of this thing. And so it says, outsiders are sometimes shocked when we have burst into merriment over a seemingly tragic experience out of the past. But why shouldn't we laugh? We have recovered. That is what is on offer, recovered. The spiritual awakening, the obsession is gone, and we have been given the power to help others. If all I do is yay, I'm recovered, I'm not going to stay recovered very long. I have a responsibility to help others, to give this to others. And when I do, man, that gold grows. And it goes on to say, everyone knows that those in bad health and those who seldom play do not laugh much. So let each family play together or separately as much as their circumstances warrant. We are sure that God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. And we talk a lot about that in the meetings. But what does that tell me? That tells me about the unconditional love of God. That is the state that God wants me in. And we know that to be true because when I stop managing my life and I take the directions and I mind that vein of the 12 steps, don't I end up happy, joyous, and free? But when I start running my life, don't I get miserable and curmudgeonly and cranky and gloomy? I turn into a miserable person. It says we cannot subscribe to the belief that this life is a veil of tears. So it was just once that for many of us. But it is clear that we made our own misery. God didn't do it. And this I got to turn into like a little sticker design. It said, avoid then the deliberate manufacture of misery. I need a sticker or a shirt to make that says deliberate misery manufacturing department, because that was me. You know what I'm saying? So do not, and it's a warning because I don't know about you. I will take a perfectly lovely Tuesday, it's a Thursday afternoon, and I know it's evening for me in the world. It's a Friday morning for Scott, but I will take a perfectly lovely day and I will think myself into suicidal ideation. I'm sure I'm the only one that knows how to do that. You know what I mean? Howard said he was going to take us all to Disneyland earlier. Listen, I'll tell you, I will think my way. I will be happiest place on earth and think about like, well, not being here no more. That is what I am like on my power. That is what I am like in my hands. And so avoid then the deliberate manufacture of misery. But if trouble comes, cheerfully, and that is the direction, cheerfully capitalize it as an opportunity to demonstrate his omnipotence. So when trouble comes, trouble will come. There will be pain. There will be suffering. There will be days where you can't tell me to write a gratitude list because I'm mad at you and I'm mad at everyone and you don't know what I went through. But if I show up to the pain and the suffering of life, I can use it as an opportunity to demonstrate God's power. Man, okay, I'm going to tell this story. I got 3 minutes left. Well, Steve, go. I didn't start. I started on time, so I shouldn't go over. But I'll tell this story. And it ties back into the very start of this study where I was talking about why I was living in such a place where gratitude was wanting. I did not have gratitude. It was because at 18 months into my sobriety, it was just after my 18 months into my sobriety, I very suddenly developed a neurological condition which left me in the use of a wheelchair. And actually, I'll tell a bit more of this story. Is what happened is I was about 2 weeks away from graduating university, and I had a staff meeting because I worked as a tutor at the university. And I go to the staff meeting and I'm not feeling very well. Now, keep in mind, the only thing I had was I had Advil and an energy drink. And so I was like, oh, my tummy's not feeling very well. And I was like, logical conclusion, I can figure out what happened there. And so I go to the washroom to go throw up. And I started to throw up so violently that I couldn't stand and that I couldn't walk. And in retrospect, looking back, I didn't know where I was or what had happened. And I had gotten rushed to the hospital. And to kind of gloss over, they sent me home and then I had to go back. And that's how bad it was. Is they got me to go to the hospital. Like, oh, that's bad. And so they took me to the hospital. And the first when I finally got admitted, I ended up on a post-surgery unit. And I was the only person on the unit who was under the age of like 80. But I was also the only one on the unit who was not allowed to go for walks on the unit. I noticed that, my eyes on that. I clocked that right away. And I want to tell you the importance of showing up in selfless service. I was sharing that story, being asked to speak at a treatment center, doing H&I sort of service. And I was asked to share that to do a share at a treatment center. I was telling that story, and it was after I did a share. One of the clients came up to me, and keep in mind, this was many years later. This wasn't like right after, but many years later, the client came up to me after I told my story at a treatment center, and he said, "Hey, Paige, is it possible that the reason you couldn't go for walks on the unit was because you couldn't walk?" It had not occurred to me. What I have is an issue with my perception. I tell you, I can't see reality. You know, it's like, no, but for me. You know what I mean? And then, yeah, so what happened is I from, well, I'll let you know what happened is I couldn't walk without assistance. And that's been my life up until that happened just over 18 months into my sobriety, year and a half. And I just this month I was 15 years sober. So the vast majority of my sobriety has by far has been spent in a wheelchair. And in sobriety, I had to learn how to read again. So as neurological problems, and I lost reading comprehension, and so I had to learn how to read again. I didn't have to learn how, ABCs, but what and I always like to tell this part of it. What that means is I had to learn how to say anonymity in front of all y'all twice. I don't need an ounce of sympathy, but I think that should get me some sort of gold star or something. You know what I'm saying? We all know what it's like to try to say anonymity in front of everyone for the first time. Thank you. I don't actually need the validation, but thank you. And what came is vertigo. What came was chronic nausea. What came is some pretty horrific symptoms with chronic pain, chronic fatigue. And that was going to be my really kind of how my life has been. And I didn't know that at that time. And I was drowning in self-pity. I was drowning in genuinely, let's say, trauma, because my life's changed in an instant. And I knew, thank you for the gold stars. And I knew that beyond a shadow of a doubt that was not fair. Do you know what I mean? I thought I knew that was not fair. I didn't know that my life was going to be the way my life has been. But I knew that I was not going to graduate on time. And I knew that I had done all this work to get sober, to stay sober. And I thought I knew that wasn't fair. And then I got moved. And I got moved to the neurological unit. And as I'm getting wheeled into the unit, the first thing I see is a man that is being spoon-fed. And then I go to my room, and my roommate is a gentleman who is almost vegetative. He can't feed himself. He can't toilet himself. He can barely communicate. He cannot adjust his own pillows, and he had been there for a long, long time. A long time. And in that moment, for the first time in my entire life, I said a prayer of gratitude. I said, thank you, God, because I was able to brush my hair. That was not easy, that I was able to brush my hair. I said, thank you, God, that I was able to make it the few steps to toilet myself by myself. Thank you, God, that I was able to feed myself. Thank you, God, that I was able to read some of the short text messages that I received in alcohol, like from other alcoholics, from people in recovery who cared about me and wanted to know how I was doing. It was the first time in my life I said, thank you, God. And I would love to tell you that in that moment carried me, and I was brimming with gratitude for the rest of my days. But I can assure you I didn't. I can assure you I was discharged from the hospital, and I was suffering, and my life had changed, and I didn't know what was going on, and there was no solution for me. And I started to fall into that bitter morass of self-pity. And that bitter morass, I'll say trauma too, because it's pretty traumatic. And I was going through a period of time. And it's a period of time that many of us in the rooms of 12-step know, when we start losing people. People are dying of this fatal illness. And I was going to funeral after funeral after funeral. I go to funerals. And actually, in my time, I've been to over 50 funerals in my life. And most of those people under the age of 40. Many of them under the age of 20. A funeral after funeral after funeral, and I did not want to do it again. I wanted to do the emotional turtle, where you put the blanket over your head. You see, if I try to hold on to that gratitude, it turns to ash in my hand. And I was pissed off because I thought I knew what was right and what was wrong, and I thought I knew what was fair and what wasn't. And my life wasn't going to be how I thought it should. My life wasn't going to be what all those people in the rooms were talking about gratitude. My life did not look like that. My life looked like vomiting every day. It looked like pain. It looked like suffering. And I couldn't do the things that I thought I needed to do. And then God showed up. And this is how God shows up, asking me to repay the debt. It was an alcoholic who called me. It's the same one that also actually asked me to do the gratitude list. That guy, poor guy, I give him such a hard time, called me up and said, Paige, because there was one more funeral. There was one more funeral and I didn't want to do. He called me up and said, Paige, I need you to be there. Because you taught me well, I said yes. And I remember now this is in my first few years, so probably year 2 or year 3 of my sobriety. And I remember I didn't have a good night's sleep. I remember it's a sleepless night, but I remember I was sitting out front of the house in my wheelchair, and I felt the peace and presence of God. And at that point in my sobriety, the only time that I ever felt that was when I was doing something for another person that I promise you I did not want to be doing. And we go to the funeral. He picks me up, we go to the funeral, and it was heartbreaking. This illness is devastating. And there is something about watching parents having to bury their son that is just heartbreaking. And it was hard, and it was not easy to sit through. Keep in mind at this point in my life, I'm like, what's the frickin' point of me? What's the frickin' point of having me here, having me alive? And the pain and the suffering that I was seeing in my life. As I'm wheeling out of the funeral service, there's a woman who's also in a wheelchair. And she comes up to me and she says, I'm so glad you're here because I don't feel so alone. And that is the goal. And my job is not to fix, to manage, to save, but to show up for those who do not know there is a way out. For those who do not know that there is help or happiness or freedom. My job is to show up and offer what was so freely given me. And that's what gratitude's all about. So I'll stop the recording and we'll wrap up with a prayer.